Good morning and a warm welcome in this Green Industrialization Conference. On behalf of Executive Director, Social Protection Resource Center, Dr. Safdar Sohail, myself and my team, we warmly welcome you in this Green Industrialization Conference. My name is Ahmed. I am the Director Research Programs at the SPRC. Before the formal start of the conference proceeding, I would like to request Mr. Waqar Bukhari to recite few verses from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد العميم لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين अंजीर की कसम और जैतून की और तूर सीनीन की और अमन वाले शहर की कि हमने इंसान को बहुत अच्छी सूरत में पैदा किया और फिर रफ्ता रफ्ता इसकी हालत को बदल के पस्त से पस्त कर दिया मगर जो लोग ईमान लाए और नेक अमल करते रहे उनके लिए अजरे अजीम है। तो ए आदम फिर तू अजर के दिन को क्यों जुटलाता है? क्या अल्लाह सबसे बड़ा हाकिम नहीं? सदाकल्लाहुल अज़ीम।
Jazakallah ji. Since most of the guests are here first time, so I would like to introduce the Social Protection Resource Center and shed some light on the objectives and the activities that are carried out from the forum of Social Protection Resource Center. Social protection as a term gained a wide currency as the collective response by governments and societies to protect citizens from economic, social, and natural shocks, as well as against the outcomes of long-standing poverty and increasing inequality. The Pakistan Alliance for Social Protection, PASP, established in the wake of COVID-19 in Pakistan early 2020. This is to highlight the need to establish a think tank to generate knowledge and empirical evidence on different dimensions of social protection in Pakistan. And this is rooted in social policy of the Pakistan. Thus, Social Protection Resource Center, SPRC, was established as a premier think tank. The decision was based on the realization that past policy choices and initiatives could not provide minimum social protection to all Pakistanis, which could reasonably withstand the vulnerability in any social, economic, or humanitarian crisis, including natural disasters. In our view, most of these vulnerabilities and shocks in most of the cases are not naturally occurring. The relevant stakeholders need more holistic and critical debates, and SPRC provides a forum to, to act upon these decisions. And as a premier think tank working on social policy in Pakistan, it provides policy advice and practical assistance to the government and other relevant stakeholders. SPRC acts as a genuine not-for-profit think tank and strive to promote socially pertinent research and share knowledge and expertise with the policy community. Furthermore, SPRC seeks to work towards social development in Pakistan in order to reduce the social exclusion in Pakistan and help achieve sustainable development goals in letter and spirit through improved evidence-based decision-making and better social actions. Thus, SPRC's mission is to help adopt a social policy based on consensus by helping revamp the existing mechanisms and arrangements of social assistance, social insurance, active labor market programs, social security regimes, and provision of basic services to grow into sustainable national social protection system introduced at the national level and administered at the provincial and local levels. SPRC is helping to improve the quality of services provided to the persons with disabilities and elderly, particularly in Islamabad Capital Territory, as an important component of SPRC work on social health protection. We have pro bono knowledge partnerships with the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Human Rights to make Islamabad a better place for persons with disabilities and elderly to live. SPRC also critically reviews the role and performance of key state institutions at national, federal, provincial, and local levels in conjunction with social mechanisms and processes to make Pakistan a more egalitarian society in the light of our constitutional responsibility, and propose the way forward with the goal of making Pakistan a significantly more egalitarian society by 2047. One of our major areas of work is to strengthen the linkages between the environmental protection and climate change policies with inclusiveness and competitiveness of the economy under a unified policy framework. We are here with you to make our contribution to strengthen these linkages. The UNCTAD SPRC partnership to promote green industrialization in Pakistan is a big step forward in this regard. Our first session aims at involving you all in this partnership. This session would be chaired by Dr. Richard Kozel Wright, Senior Director, UNCTAD, and will be moderated by our Executive Director, Dr. Safdar Sohail. Before I hand over the session to Dr. Sohail, I would like to briefly introduce Dr. Sohail. Dr. Safdar Sohail, former Secretary Cabinet, belongs to the 1984 batch of Commerce and Trade Service and with a PhD in Sociology from France. He established Social Protection Resource Center, SPRC, in 2020, and the SPRC hosts two further projects, which are Green Industrialization Development Collective and Center for Studies in Globalization and Development. Dr. Sohail was the principal author of Draft National Sustainable Development Strategy of Pakistan in 2009 and Strategic Trade Policy Framework from 2009 to 2012 and 2012 to 2015. He has served as DG Trade Policy, Ministry of Commerce and Economic Minister to EU in Brussels. He has been convener of CPEC Joint Working Group on Industrial Cooperation in Pakistan, lead negotiator on CPEC long-term plan. He volunteers his time for the joint initiatives of Ministries of Health and Human Rights to make Islamabad Capital Territory a better place for the persons with disabilities and elderly. He is also the convener of Islamabad Club Library and Literary Committee. Now I would like to request Dr. Safdar Sohail to take the stage. Thank you so much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My friend Richard, the guests coming from Geneva and colleagues from the government, from the academia, from policy community, civil society and industry. This is an honor for us that all of you are here to attend this event launch, which is the launching of our project partnership with UNCTAD, as well as a conference in the sense that the studies that we have done till date would be presented. And as Abbas has said, that we try hard at our think tank to promote the social causes. For us, environment and climate change are social policy issues on the basis of solid evidence, and we are very happy to be the local partner of UNCTAD for this project, and I thank you all. We have a lot of guests coming from outside Islamabad. I wish you a nice stay here, and I understand that your stay is comfortable here. We have an ambitious agenda for this session. We would, as Abbas said, the session would be chaired by Richard, and he would also give the keynote address introducing the project and the context in which this project has been prepared and the issues that this project seeks to address, which of course are rooted in the general UNCTAD work. And as I would briefly share while I introduce you to Dr. Richard Kozal-Wright, he is a very seriously highly regarded intellectual on globalization and the related issues. So a bit more formally, Dr. Richard Kozal-Wright is Director of Globalization and Development Strategies Division in UNCTAD. He has worked at the United Nations in both New York and Geneva. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of Cambridge, UK. He has published widely on economic issues, including inter alia in the Economic Journal, the Cambridge Journal of Economics, the Journal of Development Studies, and the Oxford Review of Economic Policy. He is the author of The Resistible Rise of Market Fundamentalism with Paul and The Case for a New Bretton Woods with Kevin, and is co-editor of the Oxford Handbook on Industrial Policy. He has written widely in newspapers, including the Financial Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, LP, China Daily, Project Syndicate, Open Democracy. So we are really lucky and fortunate to have such a senior intellectual at the international level with us. Richard, thank you very much for sparing time to travel to Islamabad. I would request you to take your chair as I introduce the other speakers. In this session, we would have with us Mr. Sajjad Moghal. He is CEO of Classical International Trading, Lahore. Mr. Mohammad Sajjad Moghal is a seasoned entrepreneur, business strategist, and private sector development specialist with over 25 years of experience in designing and implementing innovative financing solutions for the decarbonization of manufacturing processes. He is currently the CEO of Classical International Trading, CIT is a profitable and fast-growing startup that offers industrial chemicals, trading and indenting services in Pakistan and beyond. With a strong academic background and a deep understanding of the global policy and economic environment, Mr. Moghal is a recognized expert and leader in the fields of sustainable development goals. He has won several international awards and authored Pakistan's national SME policy and the first implementation plan. He is passionate about creating positive social and environmental impact through his work and partnerships and driving phenomenal growth in the industrial chemical trading sector. Mr. Moghal, please. We have with us for this session Dr. Amanullah Khan, who has traveled from Lahore. Dr. Amanullah Khan is a well-known face of the planning and development in Lahore, in Punjab. He completed his MPhil. He is Joint Chief Economist, Planning and Development Board, Government of Punjab. Dr. Aman completed his MPhil in Economics from Qaeda University, Islamabad, and later on went on to earn PhD in Economics from the University of Auckland, New Zealand. He is the author of several publications and recipient of many scholarships and grants. Currently, Dr. Aman is serving as Chief Economist for the Planning and Development Board, Government of Punjab, along with being the focal person of Government of Punjab for SDGs. For SDGs, he is also focal point for China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Punjab Growth Strategy, and Ease of Doing Business Reform Agenda. He is also supervising the Punjab Economic Research Institute and Punjab Bureau of Statistics. Dr. Amanullah, we are really grateful that you have traveled from Lahore to be with us. Please join your seat. We were supposed to have Mr. Abdur Rashid Solangi with us, who is Secretary Industries, Government of Sindh, but unfortunately due to ill health he could not come. But I would still read his, because his paper would also be shared, it would be read here. Mr. Solangi is currently Secretary of Industries and Commerce of the Government of Sindh. He has vast experience in public administration and management, having held various positions in different departments and ministries. He has a keen interest in promoting industrial development, trade facilitation, and economic growth in the province. Prior to his current assignment, he served as Secretary of Information and Secretary of Labor and Human Resource Development, where he initiated several reforms and projects to improve the delivery of public services and enhance the welfare of the workers. Now, we also have with us Mr. Abbas Raza Shah, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Engineering Development Board. As you all know, that is the policy hub of Ministry of Industries and Production. Mr. Abbas Raza Shah has professional experience of more than 30 years in strategic planning, policy making, management, marketing, and corporate governance in the public as well as private sectors in Pakistan. He provided leadership to major public sector technology organizations and led development of national policies for the engineering and technology sectors. In addition to full-time and consultancy activities in the areas of engineering, technology, ICT, and digital inclusion, he has supported various international development organizations in their developmental activities in Pakistan. Abbas Raza Sahab, kindly come to the stage. As Solangi Sahab was not coming, we have requested a senior professor of NED, Professor Noman, to stand for him also, as well as to add the academic perspective also. Noman Sahab, aaiye please. Now, the way we are going to conduct this session is that we would request Richard to give his keynote address, followed by a very brief presentation by me, and then the speakers would have chance to share their views, followed by the question and answer session. Richard, you would like to come here, or you would like more comfortable sitting there? Okay, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sohail, and good morning to everybody. I've been traveling, I think, for the last 2 weeks, and I think I probably caught a cold somewhere between New York, Marrakesh, and Islamabad. So apologies if I'm not fully coherent. I never know how much people know about UNCTAD, and I see my good friend the ambassador knows a lot, but a lot of people don't know a lot about UNCTAD. Let me just very briefly say something about the institution. We were created in 1964, so we will be 60 years old next year. We were created by developing countries. We were one of the few multilateral institutions created by developing countries, essentially to try and rewrite the rules of the global economy in a way that was much friendlier towards the needs and aspirations of developing countries. The rules of the game had been established after the Second World War, largely by and for advanced economies. So UNCTAD's job is very much to focus on the overall global context in which developing countries need to forge their development paths and to find ways of making those paths more effective and ensuring that the international community is supportive of those needs, supportive in terms of finance, supportive in terms of access to technology, supportive in terms of access to markets for the goods and services that developing countries produce. So our focus is very much on the rules and the constraints that developing countries face when it comes to designing policies in support of sustained and inclusive development. That's a long-standing challenge. I don't need to tell people in this room about the difficulties that developing countries face over the decades. Key for UNCTAD always in understanding how we could forge those kinds of development paths is, of course, the role of industrial development. We believe that successful economies are diversified economies, and that diversification critically depends upon a robust industrial sector, a diverse industrial sector with strong linkages, backward and forward linkages across the economy, and that a lot of the focus that we've done as a consequence in UNCTAD has been on the role of industrialization and the policies that developing countries need to forge their own industrial paths. So it's a very important theme. We are in UNCTAD, we are not, the market is a very important instrument in achieving diversification, but it's not an automatic process. And UNCTAD has always believed that a strong state, an effective state with a range of institutional mechanisms are required to ensure that sustained development through industrialization is possible. And we know that's a problem. I mean, we've taken a lot of our own lessons from the countries in East Asia that have successfully been able to diversify and upgrade their economies through a strong industrialization drive. And that, I think, speaks very much to the project that we have started with Dr. Sohail, which is part of a wider project, which is linked to, I guess, the most recent success story coming from Asia, which is, of course, China, which has gone through this remarkable transformation over the last 40 years, taking 500 million people out of poverty, moving from a relatively poor, largely agricultural economy to being a sophisticated middle-income economy with areas of technological excellence in certain sectors, which is quite astounding, really, given where they were just 30 years ago. Now, we are very conscious that replicating China is not a possibility for most developing countries. China has a very unique set of circumstances that allowed it to develop, and many developing countries don't have those advantages. But there are many lessons, we think, from the Chinese experience that we have tried to synthesize into kind of strategic thinking for developing countries in the current era. And of course, China is itself supporting that through some of its own initiatives, of which the most important one, of course, is the Belt and Road Initiative. And I guess many of you will know that there is a major conference going on right now in Beijing on the Belt and Road, and many participants from the developing world, including from Pakistan, have gone to attend the Belt and Road Conference in Beijing. And we've been working with the Chinese government now for a number of years on trying to understand what the challenges and opportunities are for developing countries that are participating on the Belt and Road. And there are now some 100-odd countries that are part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And so the project that we've put together with my colleagues, Gul and Maria Kara, is a project looking at 4 Asian countries that are participants on the Belt and Road: Turkey, Pakistan, Malaysia, Kazakhstan, and to try and look at the way in which not only the long-standing industrialization challenges in these countries can be improved and the kind of constraints that they face in being able to effectively mobilize resources as part of their participation on the Belt and Road, but of course a challenge that no one can ignore anymore, which is how you do that in a sustainable way in which the environmental constraints, and of course climate change being the most pronounced of those environmental constraints, is worked into an integrated policy strategy for developing countries. And so we began the project last year with a workshop in Turkey, and this meeting today is the launch of the Pakistan leg of this project on green transformation and diversification in the context of the Belt and Road. And we are very much looking forward, I think, in that context I think UNCTAD can bring its own expertise to these challenges. We have always maintained that there is no one-size-fits. We're not very friendly towards the Washington-based institutions in UNCTAD. We don't think that they have provided either the international support or the kind of policy advice that developing countries need to be able to diversify and upgrade their economies. And so we have tried to offer an alternative that looks at development policy in a much more integrated fashion, particularly from our point of view, the links between trade, finance, technology and investment, but also the social dimension too. That's not the focus of UNCTAD's work. We're very much an economic organization, but we've always brought that into our analysis. We have colleagues who work in the International Labour Organization that we work very closely with around issues of social protection, job creation, etc. So that focus on an integrated strategy is a particularly important one. The focus on the role of the state and if you like now, a kind of green developmental state is particularly important. And finally, of course, the need in that context for the multilateral system to operate in a way that is consistent with the needs and ambitions of policymakers in the developing countries. And we don't have that system in place right now. I mean, I was in Marrakesh, as I said, last week, and if you take one of the overriding issues that I'm sure many of you are aware of and worry about in Pakistan, which is the burden of debt, which is crushing many developing countries at this moment in time, in a way that the ability to mobilize resources for a more inclusive and diversified industrialization strategy is simply impossible. And our concern when we listen to representatives from the advanced world, and particularly the advanced financial world, is that they simply do not understand the kinds of pressures that are now on developing countries when it comes to mobilizing finance for the kinds of strategies that we think are necessary to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, to meet the Paris Agreement, and to forge these inclusive sustainable development paths. So we very much look forward to listening to my colleagues over the next day and a half. We are learning from you as much as I hope that we can impart some wisdom also from our side. So thanks again very much for the invitation that was extended to us and the hospitality that we've already enjoyed. And I look forward very much to a day and a half of engaged and constructive discussion on what ultimately is the challenge, I think, for developing countries in the 21st century. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard, for providing the general backdrop to the project and about UNCTAD also. One of the key reasons we have Investor Farooq Kamil with us also, who was in Geneva, our ambassador, of our valuing UNCTAD is that the heart of UNCTAD beats for the developing countries, and they have been providing valuable insights, talking about the alternatives to the received wisdom also. So when we started talking about designing this project with them, with Richard and with his team, we had this benefit of understanding. I myself have been working with UNCTAD since long due to precisely this reason that they actually work for the developing countries. Their research is basically geared towards preparing the developing countries get a better deal from the global architecture that we have in the name of globalization. So in that context, we also enhanced our ambition while designing the Pakistan leg of the whole project. I was there in Turkey last year when the Turkish project was launched, and there it was all about CBAMs and all about the keenness of EU to push steel and glass and those industries, and Turkey being on the border with custom union, their own dynamics were different. And we submitted to them that Pakistan's reality is very different, and let's jointly develop a project which can really add value and fill the gaps which we are not able to fill. I myself have been involved with being a commerce and trade officer. You see these Singapore issues, social issues. Environment has always been an issue. Trade and environment and the linkages and the way it has panned out and not gone anywhere, one would say. As was briefly mentioned here, I was the principal author of the National Sustainable Development Strategy of Pakistan, which UNEP wanted us to write. We had a 100-page long chapter on trade and environment, trade, production, and environment. And I at least did an effort to bring in polluter pays principle in that document. But the ministry did not like the document. They took another 2-3 years, came up with another NSDS which did not have trade and environment linkage or the topic that we are talking about today. It was not even mentioned. It mentioned all the other important areas like water and soil and those things. Similarly, we, sitting in the Ministry of Commerce, I remember when we were preparing the first strategic trade policy framework, we brought trade and environment there. So we tried to mainstream that. But somehow I have been personally feeling that on environment, our heart is perhaps not that open. We have been defensive on the issue of environment internationally, and once we were trying to have an FTA with the EU, and there was a feasibility study, and the study concluded that Pakistan would find it difficult to live up to the environmental standards which are there. But I would like to share with the audience that Pakistan was one of the first countries which brought in environmental protection legislation in 70s. So that has been the vision. But as we moved along, we traditionally, as we all know, we are good at making laws. Punjab has this Environmental Protection Act of year 2000, which asks the industry to self-report on pollution, and it's 23 years and we still do not have data. So we had such ground reality before that. We also should remember that the first climate change policy did not talk about manufacturing or green industrialization separately. They had a small section under mitigation where they talked about the technology transfer, and that's all. And even when they revised that, I think in 2017, it pretty much remained the same. So I kind of was of the view that being a federation, we have our own issues, and the knowledge on the sectors, on the larger sectors, we have somewhat better knowledge, but on the smaller sectors, we do not have adequate understanding. So let us do the sectoral studies. So we did a major paper which was a cross-cutting identification of binding constraints, but quickly we followed with sectoral and sub-sectoral studies, and I'll share the insights from some of those studies here, so that the binding constraints that we identified on the basis of survey of literature, interviews, consulting different documents, we could verify and see what is happening on the ground, so that we are on a firmer ground as we arrive here today. And from here, we would move to the development of integrated strategies for green industrialization in Pakistan in the months to come. Can I have my presentation? Or there is some issue there? So, do you have the presentation? Okay. So I'll start with the ground reality that we have in Pakistan. G, next please. Yeah, if you look at, for example, the detergent sector, what is happening in detergent sectors, our per annum consumption of laundry detergent is 33,000 tons. It's growing very fast, 20 to 25%. But then if you start looking at the problems that this sector, because the chemicals and detergents go into the water and then they go into the lakes, and we do have synthetic detergent for general purpose policy, but it's there on the books since 2017 and not yet enforced. And we have a large number, we have a good quality data on that. We have a large number of informal detergent manufacturers on TV. We have these big multinationals, but there is a whole range of that, because it is also linked with the lifestyle changes now. Detergents have become almost a necessity in every household, and these informal factories do not have any adequate arrangements of effluent treatments, and the exact labeling is also not done. Now, PCSIR has come up with an eco-friendly enzymes to make detergents, but it has not left out of the doors of PCSIR. We think that all the units must be registered in the first place, and there should be labeling requirements. We have seen the report and we have talked to people. The poor quality detergents are so bad for the health. The machine wash has its own set of problems, but if you wash with your own hands, the skin gets serious problems. The environmental department control also need to enforce their standards. More or less the same story with the plastics, which is a very large sector. We use 3.3 million tons of plastics in a year, and only 3% of that is recycled. 55 billion single-use plastics used in Pakistan in a year. Plastics is a very large industry, contributing 15% to the GDP, but recyclability of plastics is low in Pakistan, as other materials such as metals. One of the reasons that usually it's mixed with the other materials. We now have a new Institute of Plastics. Dr. Nadeem Javed is here at the Karachi School of Business and Leadership. I think this is the first department which has been established to undertake research in the plastics. But otherwise, generally, we know what happens to the bans that we put on the plastics. Labeling is the same problem, and the footprint of plastic sector is large. Now, we need to have more research in bioplastics. The provincial environmental departments need to provide technical support for recycling. Environmental department needs to impose fines. You see the same stories that we expect a lot from the provincial environmental protection department. Dr. Aman would perhaps speak about that. Now, we have done a study on kitchenware, on the cooking and kitchenware both. The study actually addresses the general cooking, also cooking practices and habits in the country also. And there we have found that the main problem is that our stoves and pots are not compatible with each other. Now, that ends up in the wastage of 30 to 40 billion cubic feet of gas in kitchens, a loss of $300 million. And our stoves are responsible for 2% of emissions. And there is a lot of methane wasted in that sense. And we have studied the whole sector of kitchenware, how we moved from the clay-based or earthen kitchenware then to modern materials, aluminium, steel, and others. And most of the households use such pots which actually give chemicals out when they are decayed and they become rusty, and they release metals in the atmosphere. And there are serious problems with carcinogenic effects of Teflon and PFOS. PSQCA has a detailed provision on stoves, but unimplemented. So that is it. Or here the solution again is that we think that there needs to be a broad-based dialogue between gas and fuel providers, stove designers, and pot designers. They're all working in silos. And there is a need to promote health and environment-friendly pots and ban metal-releasing toxic pots. Then there is a need for promoting fire and flame literacy. You see, these stoves are less expensive, so people buy that, or we are very careless about gas. We leave the stoves open even in winter. And so working with the producers is a issue. Now, the same story, I don't want to go on this streak that we have serious issues. But ghee and cooking oil also is the same story. But the main point that I wanted to make, and before I go to the binding constraints, that when we talk about green industrialization, normally we talk about greenhouse gases and the related issues. And normally we talk about those countries, even Turkey, where the traditional environmental protection is not an issue. Our problem is that our traditional environmental protection, pollution, effluent treatment, subsoil water, the relationship of manufacturing with environment traditionally is very problematic. Greenhouse gases are also very important. In the afternoon session, we are presenting studies on textiles, agriculture, and transport, which would focus more on these large sectors which are responsible for the bulk of it. But our problem is how to marry the traditional environmental protection issues in manufacturing with the greenhouse gases control or reduction. And one is the the responsibility of the federal government, and traditional environmental protection is the responsibility of the provincial government. And there again, we have serious issues of enforcement too. So there, in that context, when we were identifying the cross-cutting constraints, our general conclusion is that green industrialization would be considerably boosted in Pakistan if the quality of symbiosis between an improved climate policy and an improved industrial policy is strengthened. Now, this would be a very complex process, that you have to improve the respective clusters of policy. So we have one cluster where you have trade policy, industrial policy, investment policy at the federal level. Industrial policy should be there, but we don't have actually an industrial policy. We have a trade policy, and it's in the STPF that we've talked about, the comparative import substitution. And then we have to improve the policy making and implementation and enforcement of the traditional environmental. So this dissonant policy conceptualization of green industrialization, if you look at the documents at the superficial level, there are so many pathways to green industrialization being talked about in Pakistan that one is totally confused, and mostly they end up with energy. That appears to be a low-hanging fruit. That's why we did not include energy in our project at all. A lot of work is happening. It's extremely important, but we should go to those areas where relatively less work has been done. We would have the industry perspective in all the sessions, but we feel that industry is becoming green, but very slowly and selectively. These are the international buyers' requirements which are forcing the scale industry to be more compliant and to report properly and to have science-based solutions. And there we are doing well. I mean, our agriculture, we would have a session in the afternoon, and we have the industry representatives also. Our industry scale and exports is doing well. But this schizophrenic existence is problematic. Our own consumers are also important. I remember when I was Pakistan's economic minister to EU, and we had this GSP Plus, which for the first time Pakistan was given free market access in exchange of our promise to implement UN rights conventions. I literally begged EU delegation to focus on factory level compliances of 8 core environmental standards, which had it happened, it would have been much, much better. But well, there were a lot of convention 26/7, so no focus was there, I would say. We went for the macro issues, and we perhaps could have done better. Now, policy responses from the economic ministries, I briefly alluded to that. That is also an issue. Our consumer is suffering. All these 4 examples that I have given, but we do not have a voice, or the consumers are not really organized. I want to avoid the word peer pressure, but if industry is under some kind of a accountability mechanism with the help of environmental protection agency, if the environmental protection agencies can develop a mechanism of receiving complaints from the consumers, usually these are the poor consumers who would buy from the informal sector, and they would just suffer. And we have now a lot of data that environment is the biggest external determinant of health in Pakistan. Air pollution, food, environment. Data is an issue. UNIDO came up with a very advanced level scientific scheme of measuring carbon footprint, and it was too sophisticated for us. We couldn't move on. Energy is easy, so we do that, but otherwise, energy, production processes, they are 2 different things, and how does it work there, and sustainable inputs. Now, on all the 3, we need separate data with proper taxonomy to identify the production processes which are problematic. So this data is coming up. Now we're much better in data, but not really there. The green innovation is happening, but sporadically awareness of green practices is much better. You see, our own thinking is that Pakistan has come a long way. We have much better awareness. We talk about these things. Social media has contributed. So we are in a good shape now to make a major leap forward if we can generate a heat and momentum, and if we can bring all the stakeholders together. That's why we are going to talk more about it tomorrow. We have established a Green Industrialization Development Collective, bringing all the stakeholders on one platform for that. The structural problems, particularly in agriculture, we are going to talk more in the afternoon. There are bigger macro issues also, which need to be kept in mind. Preponderance of informal economy, I've already spoken about, and relatively more expensive green solutions, processes. That also is an important area, because with this rupee-dollar parity, importing capital goods would also be a problem. And that is the reason, Richard, that we have involved a lot of engineering universities in our project. We have representation in this hall today from NED, from UET Texla, from UET Lahore, from NUST, from Punjab University, because as long as we would not have indigenous technological solutions for greening of manufacturing, we would not be able to go that far. It's only the scale which can import the machinery for satisfying buyer compliances, but the informal economy and the bulk of industries, medium-sized and small-sized, the industry has to benefit from the local innovation. So these are the 9 binding constraints that we have identified, and we shared the original paper, which has been completed with our speakers, whom I requested to comment on the paper also, but also share their perspective, where they are coming from. So we start with Mr. Sajjad Moghal. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Sajjad Moghal. Today I'm representing my private sector experience as an industrialist rather than my policy experience. But I think there are 2 fundamental understanding from a private sector that needs to weigh in into this whole scheme of things, and that I also struggled when we were talking about industrialization or any other policy. Dr. Sahab has very, very, I would say, methodically and systematically outlined all those 9 binding constraints. And I was looking through the list, and I also understood that the symbiosis of different industrial policies, their interconnection with each other, and how they talk to each other to provide the basic rules of the game as the government custodian of the game, which is called industrialization or a business, and how does it implement it. But in the list of constraints, when we are talking about the policies, I realize that from an industrialist perspective, I go out and see that 70–80% of all my clients are SMEs. Their base level of knowledge or even basic fundamental education does not allow them to understand the concept of green and industrialization. What does the green means? He has learned his manufacturing process or set up his industry by looking at others. He doesn't know even the technology, or he has just copied it by learning it and seeing it. And there are mostly spin-offs which are traditionally giving birth to another businesses or industry after they have worked long enough with a medium-sized industry for a while. So, do we look at a communication with this 70% sector, which is responsible also for the industrial processes? And you also mentioned in your subsectoral studies as well, and I have seen it myself. For instance, I gave you an example. Let's go to an industrial park, which is a very fancy one and an upscale, called Sundar. In Sundar industrial plant, there are two types of industries, because I'm also part of that community. I'm also part of Qaid-e-Azam Industrial Estate, which is a second industrial estate within Lahore, a formal one, which is a small and medium-sized industries located there. But I haven't seen a single initiative which tells them what does the green means. So we continue to pollute without even a knowledge what does the pollution means. We don't know really what is the concept of a recycling, downcycling, and also even reuse. So plastic, for instance. I have been working with the MNCs for last 3 years in the plastic neutrality, and Aman is sitting right there. He is helping us to find a financier where we are really talking about the recycling, but most of the businesses doing here are downcycling, pushing the plastic to the next stage, and that pushes the plastic to the next stage. And interestingly, even a United Nations Industrial Development Organization did a study. The total plastic produced every year in all its forms adds up to 2 K2 mountains. And that's true. Nobody really realized this is only one sector which imports resins in its raw form, adding up to $1 billion US. And if we set a systematic target, and our best shot as a policy, as a development constraint, is eliminating shopping bag plastics, replacing it with another technology which degrades in 450 years. Really? And a court weighs in somehow, and a lawyer tells us what needs to be done. Really? Don't we see it a binding constraint in the growth? What is the level of a trust, even as an educated industrialist I have, in the policy institutions, in implementation mechanisms, and even contract enforcement? Why should I listen to that? Don't you see it as a binding constraint? Who is going to articulate it? As a Policy 101 course, people told me when I studied that step number 1 is you advocate what you really believe in. And part 2 is you define through a policy the rules of the game, your intention. And with the subordinate legislation and regulations, you provide a legal protections to those rules of the game. And you help develop those institutions who are the custodian of those rules to implement them. So it is a level playing field for everyone. And guess what? In every single policy, in every single law, the first breach always happens by the state. Give you an example, another. Sundari Industrial Estate is supposed to have a collective, a community affluent plant, which reduces the overall burden of a cost on all those industries who are operating in Sundar. There is none. The Environmental Protection Agency of Punjab government NACAMS forces every single industry to have their own affluent plant, a breach of contract. I was given a location and the place for the production in that industrial park through the government, and I paid for that. And I paid for that when the allotment happened. So who breached first? So what is the confidence in those laws, policies, or regulations if the first breach is going to happen from the custodian? That is the binding constraint. So people don't have a trust in that, regardless. Let alone that 80% of the industries does not understand what the green means, what the recycling means, what the resource recovery means, what the energy efficiency means. I have been lucky enough to work with, in my other capacities, to work and look at the green initiatives on a larger spectrum, where we are looking at all the possible elements of greener and much cleaner production. But every single step requires A, understanding, B, the commitment of resources, C, then execution and monitoring, and let people know what is going to come after that. So the problem here is my next door neighbor in a industry is allowed to produce these detergents, but whatever means, he has a production cost which is significantly lower than mine because I'm more formal. And I am a medium scale manufacturer who does not have a brand like MNCs, can latch on electronic media branding to get a top up price for that. So what do I do? My cost equation is gone because I am also subject to a regulatory compliance, which is not really a case for those small guys because they are not on the radar, but they are significant in terms of a production potential because they are 70% of the economy. So the level playing field is gone. The policy parameters, the regulations, and the laws, in fact, are all leads to only one direction, and that direction is your rules of the games are defined. These rules of the games have a legal backing, and this is applicable to every single citizen, in that case, the industry, the corporate entity, or non-corporate entity, which is operating within that economy, and all are subject to the same rules. I'm not against incentives, subsidies, and selective and targeted subsidies. It is our responsibility as a community, as an industrial community, and as the regulatory community to provide and lend hand to those who are the small enough and cannot have a financial or otherwise human resource, technological resources, knowledge resources, information resources to provide them with that. And if it requires some sort of a financial support to get a hand on those, I'm for that. I will be the first guy to put out, but those should also be structured, meaningful, and targeted. So we always have a shotgun approach, and I also saw that where the most of the policy evolves and how does it happen. And my own understanding of any structural and a policy changes for last 2 decades, I have seen it is always driven by multilaterals or bilaterals. I yet have to find a single example where meaningful change has happened in Pakistan without a leverage from them. So let's unpack what happens. There is nothing wrong with that. If a bilaterals or the multilaterals. So we put a spotlight or a magnifying glass. I call it a magnifying glass phenomena because when you put a magnifying glass on something, it blows up. It becomes larger than its real size. So it also diminishes other things which are important. Multilaterals and bilaterals, when provide support, that magnifying effect happens. This is our responsibility. There is nothing wrong with the multilaterals or bilateral when they are lending help. They are here to help. But it does not allow us to abdicate our role, to do the rationalization while looking at the larger picture. So it pulls the policy direction, it pulls the implementation direction in a one direction way too much, so it becomes not a level playing field. Look at the taxation administration law and the modernization. Look at the deregulation of banking. Look at all major policy changes which has happened in last 20 years, and you will find the same phenomena is repeated again and again and again and again. So my humble request that while we are looking at those policy constraints or the binding constraints, where do we put these 2 or 3 submissions in this whole scheme of things? Because that has a bigger semantics and a larger message in the industry from a private sector. So while I agree, I totally agree with all those 9 binding agreements, those are important. They're super important because those talk about the basic fundamentals of within the economy. But at the same time, when it comes where the rubber meets the road, where it comes to us for implementation, when it starts talking to us as an industry, how do we see it? I just provided a window at a perspective with the submission that this needs to be integrated. So if I summarize it, what I said is primarily laws, policies, or subordinate regulations provide a rule which also tells you that it is a legal binding for all of us, and there is an unspoken but very well written contract among all parties. The regulators, the implementers, the subjects, and the economy itself, and the participants in that economy, which are industrialized. Nobody should be allowed to breach that one. The government more so. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moghal, thank you very much for identifying critical points which we certainly would integrate with our reports and proceedings. Spotlight by bilaterals, multilaterals is a big issue. Indirectly, that's why we didn't bring energy in as such, that already there's a lot of spotlight in that, and we went to the subsectoral level. But thank you very much for bringing out the industry perspective. What I understand from your key point is that if government does not breach its own laws, industry would also. We would see in the discussion that where do we go in this chicken and egg situation, because we have, I've spent most of my life in the government. It's mixed. On government side also, there are a lot of entities and a lot of departments who are good. Industry also, we actually tolerate perhaps industry behavior by bringing everything under informal economy, as an informal economy is bound to have this kind of behavior, which may not be actually. You see, the word informal is also very problematic. So when it comes to the government, I think it is not lost to the government the requirements of green industrialization. And we have Mr. Abbas Raza Sahab with us, who is CEO of Engineering Development Board, which has the responsibility directly of greening our manufacturing. आप यहीं बैठ के बात करेंगे या?
Request you to kindly allow me the luxury of sitting here and maybe kind of adding a little bit to.
Please go ahead.
So thank you so much. I think before I start, I had a few points I was trying to put together since yesterday, and I thought I'd share my background where I'm coming from, because that puts in perspective what I would like to add to Dr. Saab's study. And let me start by really congratulating Dr. Saab on an excellent, incisive, pertinent, to the point study, and gives a lot of food for thought for people like us. Myself, I've been around 34 years of experience that I've had. This is my, I think, the 16th year I've worked in government, and I've worked in the Ministry of Information Technology, Science and Technology, and now this is the 4th year in industries, and around, I would say, 18 years in the private sector. So I think with this sort of background, and just like to add that presently our work in the Ministry of, the Engineering Development Board, which is a part of Ministry of Industry and Production, and we look after policy making regulations for the engineering industry, which is a subset of the larger industrial landscape of the country. And again, as you said, that's also kind of distributed between what the Federation does and what the provinces do. I think with the background that I come from, I kind of public-private, I have this luxury of trying to look at the system critically without, I think, having the expertise in governance and government to be an authority on it. So please correct me, and there are people from the government here who can correct me if I've put something in the wrong perspective. We have a rules of, you mentioned about, I think, what I'm trying to kind of come is the lack of symbiosis and the relationship between the policies and the different ministries. So we have an efficient system of distribution of work under the rules of business, very nicely defined. And in our case, we, for example, have had to refer in certain matters, and you go to the relevant organization and they very finally tell you what falls in which category. But it's an efficient distribution of work. Unfortunately, that also creates silos. It creates silos, it misses out the feedback mechanism. And as far as the greening is concerned, I feel like it's not something that the green initiative, the greening of the policy making, it's not, I think, really fair to be giving it to a particular ministry as we've done. Like, we give it to Ministry of Climate and we kind of ask them to get along with it. A second thing that in policy making I've seen is that we need policies linking to development goals. We need to have national development goals which are kind of updated as we go along. We used to have 5-year plans, and I think that was maybe a lot of criticism on it, but it gave a perspective of what we want to do during this period, where we want to reach end of that period, and how do we want to get along doing it, as well as the resource mobilization and everything. So I feel like in an important subject like climate, and Pakistan is, as you mentioned, and as we know, it's a major affectee of whatever is happening, although we may not be contributing, but when I see in industry, we're starting to contribute in some really bad ways. We are a major affectee, and I think we need to kind of mainstream the climate initiative, and we need to kind of integrate it into our national development goals. Some of the, I think I'll give you, maybe try to give a couple of examples that Dr. Saab rightly talked about. Again, we have a climate policy and given to Ministry of Climate, and we used to have industrial policy, and we are, I think, working on an industrial policy as we speak. But again, as you mentioned, the issue really is the division of work between the federation and the provinces. A lot of important areas like, for example, small-scale industry, industrial estates, mining you mentioned, major area laws, environmental regulation, a lot of enforcement, a lot of levers are with the provinces. So again, unless we have unless we have things that are integrated into the national development goals, and we have a kind of a system of cooperation between the different ministries as well as the ministries, federal and the provincial authorities, we kind of may have very elaborate policies, but the end result would kind of elude us. And I give you, I think, example of a couple of things. And you've mentioned in your paper, Dr. Sohail, that as far as the national NDCs are concerned, we have given targets of, let's say, 60% renewable energy and 30% electric vehicles, and ban on imported coal by 2030. But how do we plan to do it, really? Number one. Second, where are the inputs? How did the targets come about? I mean, this is a classic example of how we assign something to a ministry, we come up with targets which kind of fall in the domain of other entities we have to implement. So if there are 30% of EVs by 2030, who are the entities who are consulted, and do they know whether 30% has to be done by 2030? kind of, I think maybe some of the things, well, at least this one of the things that I may say may not be kind of music to years of climate people, but for example, banning, it says imported coal, but I don't know why imported coal, but I think coal has to be an important element in the development of Pakistan. I think we have to kind of base policies, targets on ground reality. We cannot avoid using coal. Other countries have gone through this process, but how do we lessen the impact, or how do we then ensure that we kind of recover it in other sectors of the economy? So I don't know if we have done, I think this is something that we need to look at very seriously. Tar coal is one of the cheapest sources of energy we are going to get, and that cannot be avoided. So another area, Dr. Saab, you mentioned about transport sector. Now, transport sector, you're right, major cause of emissions and a major cause of FE outflow as far as imported fuel is concerned. And we excuse me, when we were working on electric vehicles, and we had this figure from Ministry of Energy of just the motorcycles on the road. We have around more than 25 million on the road. The annual cost of fuel for the motorcycle is around $3 billion. Again, EV, I think, is an area that really cannot be given to one entity. For example, I'll tell you what we've done. We came up with an incentive regime, commerce, industries together, and under that, around 31 licenses have been issued for two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and I think we have some reasonable kind of vehicles or two-wheelers starting to be coming on the road. But other areas, like, for example, when you look at the policy, it had said a number of things. It had talked about standards, it had talked about infrastructure, it had talked about tariffs, what sort of charging tariffs you would give. So when you look at all these areas, the registration has to be done in the provinces, the transport authorities are in the provinces. So although we had 30 plus companies coming in, setting up manufacturing, the uptake is still not there. And when we looked into the financing, how to create demand, one of the areas is subsidy. Worldwide. EV proliferation has happened through subsidies. Considering the fiscal space that we have in the country, we could not kind of allocate any money for subsidizing a certain number of EVs to start with. But then we talk about green financing, and also was alluded to, and green financing is really elusive, I think, as far as financing is concerned. It's if you look at the volume of green financing to even countries like India, it's very, very small. And when we went to the Ministry of Climate Control, the process they explained us, so it's a few years before you could kind of tap into those sort of things. So that is another area. And I think talking about the earlier coal thing, also the carbon credit market development, that's something Dr. has alluded to. I think that as a lot more work needs to be done, because that's kind of EU is starting to going to be implementing it for imports, and we have representative from commerce here. And so these are something that have given us food for thought, and we need to look into it. Another area that, and finally I want to, I think, close with that is, how do we, what are the levers of policy making? Normally, other than financing, which is now not there, and subsidies, which kind of, we don't have the space again, so we use the, and Dr. Saab is being there, we use tariffs to kind of create a favorable environment for local industry, to kind of protect the local industry and kind of create champions for export. But that tariffs, although we based it on the capacity of the industry to import, substitute, and export, we do not factor in other things like, and things that you mentioned in your paper about innovation, about R&D, about wastage. I mean, there are sectors of the economy, we don't want to name them, where if you go, you have maybe, for example, 50% wastage. And 50% wastage means doing that thing twice, right? So these are the kind of things that need to be part of the policy frameworks whenever we look into incentivizing certain sectors. And I think in closing, I think also talked about commerce and industry and people. And I think the words, I just picked up the words, and those, we still now, in today's day and age, we still talk about, I think, exports enhancement, and we talk about import substitution. And again, these are, again, silo-based approaches. See? I think what we need to really work on in terms of policy within the country is integrating Pakistan into the global supply chain. That's when all these international standards and international regulations and all these best practices automatically start coming into these industries. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I've been all over the place, but it's a pleasure to be here and always a pleasure to be interacting with you, Dr. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abbas. Your presence means a lot for us because your Engineering Development Board has a key role in the coming days to push for green industrialization in the country. This is a very interesting point, that the rules of business were made basically to make clear jurisdictions identified, but somehow with passage of time, these very rules of business have become now divisions between and have established silos. So how do you undertake these governance reforms that the constraints that with the passage of time the rules of business have imposed on the divisions, there is possibility of interministerials, etc. But I think this is a very important point to consider, that maybe this should also be a rule of business to cooperate with other ministries actively when there are such issues which are co-shared with other ministries. And your point, you see, need of planning better, that is extremely important. And you have put it very correctly that for incentives you don't have money to pay. The manufacturing practices, there is no appetite perhaps for internal motivation to change that. So where do you go? So that way we have been actually depending more as a policy option on the incentives to transform or buyer compliances. So these have been two major levers of transformation, which work to an extent, but we are not, I mean, you have yourself said that we adopted ambitious and NDCs, but we are perhaps far from their realization. So planning is extremely important, particularly in a constrained environment. Richard talked about debt and the constrained environment. So for us in this conference, this would be a major challenge to ponder, to consider that how you can still effect this green transformation in a highly constrained environment. But they normally say that the provincial governments are not that constrained when it comes to the resources. So let's hear from Dr. Amanullah about the provincial context. He has been the chief economist of Punjab government since long. It's over to you, Dr. Amanullah.
Thank you very much. I'll be briefly discussing about the background paper you have shared with us, and then I'll be talking about the initiatives taken by the provincial government, Punjab government, in the past few years. First of all, Dr. Safdar Sohail and Richard Wright, distinguished panelists, and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. And I think it is still morning, and very good morning. It is a great privilege for me to speak as a discussant at the inaugural session of launching Pakistan Green Industrialization Project organized jointly by United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and Social Protection Resource Center. This event has provided me an opportunity to discuss the most important aspects of the economy, green industrialization, and the reforms introduced by the government of the Punjab for green industrialization efforts during the last few years. In the first part of my discussion, I'll be focusing on the background paper. The background paper is highlighted by Moghal Saab and our CEO in Development Board. It highlights the green industrialization progress in Pakistan, which has been slow, as rightly pointed out in the discussion paper. It identifies key obstacles including poor policy conceptualization, which is very important issue, and it is highlighted by Sajjad, absence of industry pressure, inadequate economic ministry responses, data issues, lack of innovation and awareness, limited green finance, and the informal economy, which is a big part of Pakistan's economy. So, and higher local green practices cost. To drive change, it is crucial to both understand these challenges and develop creative solutions that strengthen the relationship between climate and industrial policy on macro, sectoral, and cross-cutting level. Transitioning Pakistan's industries to sustainability is essential to mitigate environmental and social impacts and support growth. Despite industrial growth, it hasn't contributed adequately to overall development in Pakistan. The lack of focus on resource use and pollution has led economic, environmental, and social burdens, especially in cities like, we talk about Punjab, Lahore, Gujranwala, Sialkot, and Gujarat, which are the major cities in Punjab. And most of the clusters of small and medium enterprises are located in these cities. And we have, by the way, comparative advantage in small and medium enterprises. 70% of the SMEs are located in province of Punjab. And if you talk about few issues in the paper, it focuses on CO2 emissions, but not a framework for water and noise pollution. As everyone knows, industries pollute water and soil more than they pollute air. Water pollution is neither provincial or federal issue, it's local issue, and it is not being dealt in the paper. And another aspect which I want to highlight, I think it will be covered in your papers on textile. While we export one pair of jeans, t-shirt, towel, we end up exporting thousands of liters of water with it. Without robust water accounting framework, we won't spend anywhere. And if we talk about international best practices illustrate that the types of economic, environmental, social benefit from eco-industrial park, which is highlighted by the study conducted by World Bank, are substantial, transcending conventional business case benefit. This is which we can highlight in the background paper and which can be recommended. And moreover, if I'll now go into the details about initiatives and projects and programs recently implemented by the Punjab government. We have our Punjab Growth Strategy 2023, which will be ending this year, highlighted the importance of private sector led, investment-driven, export-oriented, environmentally responsible, and job-intensive growth. A comprehensive green industry policy, this is another point which we need to focus on at the provincial and national level. We need to have a green industrial policy that can achieve these goals and set an example for Pakistan. And recently we have in our planning framework, we have climate budget tagging process. It's being institutionalized as priority in Government of Punjab PND board and will help inform and guide policy choices regarding climate-related investments. Then we have another important aspects under Punjab Green Development Program, which is jointly funded by World Bank and Government of Punjab. It's a $200 to $300 million project, we are planning to establish Environment Endowment Fund with a capital of, around $50 million for development of green financing strategy of Punjab to channelize public and private capital to strengthen environmental governance and promote green investment in Punjab. Moreover, our finance department has commenced work on, green financing strategy for the province, and this will help identify sources of funding under climate and green finance over medium and long term. And the program which we are implementing right now, Punjab Green Development Program, it aims to enhance environmental management and promote green development. It involves boosting the capacity of the Environmental Protection Department and Environmental Protection Agency, updating regulations, and encouraging cleaner technologies to reduce pollution in priority sectors. If we talk about another initiative which was taken by Punjab government due to smog in the recent years, amid heavy winter smog in Punjab, authorities are adopting to reduce air pollution. Traditional brick lamps are a major source of pollution, so the introduction of zigzag technology is aimed at protecting the climate, modernizing the brick sector, improving efficiency, and lowering production cost. Then we have another initiative which is very important to address the environmental pollution threat arising from scattered tanneries, leather tanneries. In and around Sialkot, Government of Punjab, in collaboration with the Sialkot Chamber of Commerce and Industries, has launched the Sialkot Tannery Zone project, and this is also we are implementing. And Moghal Sahab has already, highlighted common effluent treatment plant, issue. So this is, the creation of industrial states or development of industrial states and small special economic zone. The purpose was to, have a common effluent plant with all these SEZs and industrial states. So this is what we have been working on. Finally, the shift requires, towards green industrialization, a two-pronged approach involving the reinforcement of environmental policies, the stick, and the development of elements of green industrial policy, focusing on investment, innovation, and trade incentive, the carrot. Importantly, policy goals should extend beyond the current focus on pollution control and compliance, encompassing preventive and circular approaches at the farm and industry level to yield both environmental productivity benefit. The time has come to incorporate these strategies into regulations, institutionalize them, and make them integral component of relevant government agencies. Moreover, the absence of effective environmental governance, which is rightly pointed out in the background paper, and as our speakers have rightly pointed out about the environmental governance, which is deficient. That is why we have getting support from multilateral and bilateral development partners. Like if I talk about, Punjab government, we have our Environmental Protection Agency, then we have our Environmental Protection Department, and they are running only one important key project in collaboration with the World Bank, and this is our Punjab Green Development Program, multi-million-dollar project. So it was rightly pointed out by Moghal Sahab, as you have previously worked with the USAID, and how you drive us. The absence of effective environmental governance, comprehensive green growth strategies, and instrument to stimulate green investment hampers efforts to reduce pollution emissions across all sectors and support the sustainable development of the province. We are currently, in the process of formulating next 5 years growth strategy for Punjab government. And I'm highly grateful to SPRC and UNCTAD. Now we will be definitely focusing on green industrialization and international best practices, like, as I mentioned, eco-industrial parks in the new strategy, so that we can move towards actually, implementing such strategies in the province. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. for going through the paper in detail and giving your views on the paper and sharing with us the developments in Punjab. I wonder that, are you heading towards adopting provincial NDCs? You see, we have NDCs because it's excellent that you are putting in place an institutional infrastructure, policies, financing, everything. But how would it kind of work out towards? So that's a question which I would like. Right now, there's nothing of this sort, I guess. Okay, great. Now we have the last speaker with us, Professor Noman Ahmed. He is an architect and urban planner by training. He is an avid researcher, writer, and academician with over 30 years of experience. He is currently working as Dean, Faculty of Architecture and Sciences at NED University of Engineering and Technology. Noman sir, thank you very much for taking the trouble to travel from Karachi to Islamabad. And as I said earlier, that we have also requested him to represent Mr. Nazir Solangi, Secretary Industries, who could not come despite he had the confirmed ticket also due to his ill health. So kindly read his speech and then add your own comments also too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Safdar Sohail. I'm standing in for my colleague Abdul Rashid Solangi, the Secretary of Industries, Government of Sindh. So on his behalf, the points that he in fact prepared for this particular moot, they are as follows. First of all, I extend my gratitude to UNCTAD and the Social Protection Resource Center for inviting me to this very auspicious event, which is closer to a well-being and prosperity. The province of Sindh has important green or sustainability lessons for the rest of Pakistan and similar places in South Asia because of its rigorous experience of suffering and mitigating climate change with very limited resources. Sindh is the most vulnerable province to climate change in Pakistan, as was witnessed very recently. A World Bank study in 2015 revealed that Sindh was losing about 15% of its GDP annually to climate and environment-related problems. It lost $20 billion, which accounts for 70% of flood losses in the country. It is much higher than the national average. As a lower riparian province, Sindh is vulnerable to both dry weather as well as floods. Sindh has also seen some very acute instances of heat waves. The province put in place the first ever climate change policy in July 2022. Sindh pioneered climate resilient housing for the victims of flood using local construction materials and approaches with preventive elevations. In case these are floods in the future, this climate resilient housing approach is being replicated not only in Pakistan but in other climate-prone locations in South Asia. Recently, in the 2022 floods, Sindh lost about 90% of its standing crops. Yes, it's put into place supportive activities to promote climate-resilient and climate-smart agriculture and food production across the province. Sindh government has been quite progressive in taking the Geneva Conference on Climate-Resilient Pakistan forward. It held a follow-up conference on Resilient Sindh from Pledges to Reconstruction in February 23. The commitments made at this conference deal with the climate vulnerabilities in a comprehensive manner. Many of these commitments resonate with the goals of Social Protection Resource Center's Green Industry Conference today. A number of green initiatives have been undertaken in Sindh. For example, the Green Economy Initiative has been launched in July 22, jointly with the UNDP. Pakistan's first green hydrogen plant with a capacity of 150,000 kg hydrogen fuel per day is being built here. This initiative will gradually be extended to achieve Sindh's potential of about 50,000 megawatts of wind and 10,000 megawatts of solar energy. Government of Sindh is also supporting other provinces in advancing renewable energy production at affordable cost to meet the energy demand in the country in a sustainable way. The three hallmarks of the Climate Change Policy 2022 of Sindh are using renewable energy sources to reduce industrial emissions, second, youth-led climate mitigation, and third, nature-based solutions in climate adaptation and mitigation. Sindh, as the most industrialized province with 50% of country's industry, aspires to lead decarbonizing economy in the country. Currently, industries are producing about 6% of carbon dioxide. Government of Sindh is not only promoting renewable energy in industry, but also progressively monitoring and controlling emissions. It is keenly encouraging industries to adopt nature-based solutions. The industries in Karachi produce about 100 million gallons of effluents per day. The treatment of this effluent has increased to 10%, although it needs to be much more. It is hoped with nature-based solutions, the amount of treatment is likely to double in the next 3 years. The solid-based recycling has already been doubled. The Sindh Environmental Protection Act of 2014 has already provided for cleaner production options. It has Sindh Cleaner Production Programs. It has set up a Cleaner Production Policy Committee through Sindh Environmental Protection Agency. This is promoting environment-friendly business plans. Budgetary allocations for clean productions have already increased, and multiple departments have basically joined hands with the Sindh government. There are a number of non-governmental organizations also, in fact, invited to join hands in this enterprise. Cleaner production is moving in Sindh with the help of UNIDO, WWF, and many other international agencies. Sindh has become a leading actor in expanding cleaner production, and we believe that this process is going to enhance in the times to come. In a short span of these policy frameworks, the government of Sindh has also achieved a kind of a policy coherence. The Departments of Energy, Environment, Commerce, Industry, Solid-Based Planning and Development, and also the Chambers of Commerce and Industries have increased coordination, and they regularly interact with one another. It is due to this coordination mechanism, the implementation of various measures on cleaner production, environment, and climate mitigation are on fast track, and we believe that the industry is going to continue with this process in the times to come. A joint assessment by European Union, United Nations Environmental Programme, and the ILO of the cleaner production in Sindh has regarded the effort to be productive, sustainable, and useful in the times to come. A number of experiments are being successfully undertaken both voluntarily and involuntarily by the industrial units to reduce the consumption of water in their production, especially some units that are producing denim and other types of textiles. These efforts and steps demonstrate the possibilities hidden in making the industrial production safer and cleaner, and reducing the use of fossil fuels, raw materials, and natural resources. It is not to deny the problems of both industry and environment in Sindh. They remain enormous, but the policies and frameworks currently being enforced in Sindh are contributing to improve the situation of environment by reducing waste and by encouraging nature-friendly solutions. Sindh needs to work more on upgrading and bringing in environment-friendly production knowledge from artisans and craftspeople of Sindh who have evolved naturally nature-friendly production processes in clay pottery, in furniture, in tanneries, in food safety, in textiles, and also in forestry. We think that partnerships across provinces on this matter is essential. We can work together to share nature-based knowledge, traditional knowledge, and the local practices which can help make industrial production greener in Pakistan. I invite all of you to join hands with us. We will be forthcoming and welcoming to you in our endeavors, and we look forward to working together. So this was the message that my colleague Abdul Rashid Solangi, the Secretary of Industries, gave. I have two very quick comments as an urban planner. I think alongside the solutions and issues that we discussed related to industrialization and trying to attempt to make it greener, there is a very important dimension, and that is the dimension of our lifestyles. Over the period of time, we have seen that the processes of consumption have increased, and one direct outcome of these consumption processes are the various types of waste. And so far, the type of waste and the manner in which we deal with them, that needs to be revisited. In most of our considerations, we consider waste as a liability, whereas in the usual, I would say, stride, I would say that waste is a resource. And in many ways, these wastes that are routinely generated and are going to increase in volume and complexity, they can be transformed in various types of production processes. Now, while there are a number of technological issues that have been discussed in respect to waste, there is an important social consideration or range of social considerations that also need to be taken into account. General perceptions about different types of waste. Generally, waste is considered to be, or enterprises related to waste are considered to be a kind of a situation which has to be dealt with only one type of people. And generally, ordinary people tend to prevent their interaction with waste. And that makes waste a very underutilized resource in our normal production processes, as well as the other types of enterprises that can emanate from it. There was a substantial mention about the informal enterprises, and various types of communities routinely interact with waste, take out resources, utilize it for their own entrepreneurial purposes, but in the process perhaps leave the environment poorer. So I think through this moot and many other similar events, it will be useful if we see that how the changes that are happening in our society can basically take account of the manner in which we are generating waste, how as responsible citizens we are dealing with it, and how perhaps we can make the larger public aware about our responsibility towards waste, right from the generation towards its utilization in various forms and formats. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noman sir, for not only sharing a detailed rundown of what Sindh government is doing and the laws, and as has been pointed out by Mr. Solangi, that 50% of Pakistan's industry is in Sindh, so Sindh remains an extremely important province of Pakistan in terms of green industrialization, and also at the same time is one of the worst victims of climate change also, but very progressive in terms of laws also. Sindh has always usually taken lead in that, so thank you very much. And also bringing out this aspect of waste, the social aspect, the lifestyle aspect. I think we are not very keen on SDG 12, which deals with sustainable production and consumption. We have not even adopted targets on that. But I thank you particularly for identifying one aspect which normally is not there. You see, we identify waste with certain communities, for example, as if this is something dirty. We in this project have actually a study on lean manufacturing which addresses the waste issue within the industry, as we saw this morning. But I think the urban waste, for example, and its use, that is something which is extremely important, and it has huge negative environmental implications. Now we have some time, folks, for questions from the panel. So who would take the lead in the question? Amjad Saab, he is a specialist in lean manufacturing from Engineering University, Lahore. He is a professor. And it's over to you, and a small polite reminder that we are a bit delayed for starting the next session after tea. So instead of comments, please ask the questions or a very brief comment. Basically, these are the conversations which would help us a lot in taking the project forward and making a good contribution. So, Professor Amjad. माइक दे दीजिए.
Some of the very salient features that must be considered while we are devising any kind of policy for the green industrialization. I would like to comment on one of the parameters that you have mentioned in your talk that was related to the better and more data effective utilization under the robust framework. So I totally agree with this one. I would like to explain this particular perspective and its significance with one or two examples. So availability of the data in terms of devising a policy is one of the key pillars. If you don't have the data, it is said that the data is a constraint. You don't have the data, you cannot devise the policy in a more sustainable way. For example, in the manufacturing sector, being an expert on the lean manufacturing, so we don't have the GHG emissions data of the manufacturing processes and practices we are using in the localized context. In the global context, we have multiple databases on GHG and the GHG protocols and IFC standards and multiple other databases available. However, in the localized context, it is missing. Why it is important to capture the data in a localized context? For example, if we think about the green industrialization of the textile sector, so all the machinery, all the equipments that we are utilizing in our local industry are the second-hand machinery. So the carbon footprint that we are getting from the international standards and the international policies documents, those are not relevant to our localized context. The machinery we are using that was manufactured, for example, 100 years or 50 years ago, and we are utilizing that machinery as a second-hand equipment here, and we haven't any mechanism to, this would be something, the false assumption if we are developing something on the international data. Similarly, the another example could be, we have the multiple fertilizer plants all over the country, which were manufactured more than 100 years ago in some developed country, and we, purchased that one and installed here. And the Angro, I think, I don't exactly remember, might have the only one plant which is, that was installed first time here. All others are a second hand. So this is one of the things that we need to understand, that how we are manufacturing the products, and we need to capture the data in the localized context, and we need to integrate that. And we are heading towards the development of integrated framework for green industrialization. We need to integrate that data while we are formulating the policy. This Excellent. Is one of the comment that I would like to emphasize. And there was another thing that is also related to the data. One of our key speaker from Sindh, Dr. Saab has rightly mentioned that they have taken wonderful initiatives. I know about renewable energy. For example, we have recently conducted a study about the use of biomass for utilizing the biomass for energy production for the industrial units. So we came up with the conclusion that there are multiple biomasses available in the localized context all over the country. But again, the data about the local crops, their GCVs, as well as their carbon footprint and their utilization in the local context, we need to build on that. So the initiative is great, but whenever we want to develop some policy or we want to develop something which is sustainable, we need to understand the localized context, practices in the larger context, so that we can develop something which is more practical and doable. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent, Professor. We hope to continue benefiting from your insights, Ji. Tariq Binori sir. ये आगे दे दीजिएगा माइक.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'll be very brief, but we'll have to have a longer conversation. My quick point is that I feel like I'm Rip Van Winkle. I come back after 30 years, and people are still talking about the things we were talking about in the early 90s. Right? All of these issues we went through in the 90s. And even the ones where we did make some headway, they seem to be forgotten. So one thing I would recommend is that there were some studies that we did in the 90s which would be relevant for you, both in terms of the results, but also in terms of the methodology. We did studies on the textile sector, extensive studies, and also on the paper sector. And looking at both the formal and the informal sector, we sat down with the industry, with labor unions, with NGOs, with government representatives to come up with policies. And in both of those cases, the industry association adopted those policies before the governments did. Now, unfortunately, the political system is so fraught that things go up and down and then nothing happens. But still, if you're going to work on those are things that you do need to look at. And all of these issues, we went through all of them. So at this moment, my suggestion is that a lot of the discussion seems to be at a very high level, which means that these are things which even a drawing room conversation we would know. Yeah, there's this problem of pollution and air pollution and et cetera, or financing. We do need to go into some details. Whoever has done some detailed work, please pull that out. So I'll try to make sure that that is there. The second issue that you have also focused on, which is a very important one, perhaps more important than the other, is the governance issue. That basically there's no interest in policy making, right? And so, I mean, most of the policies you look at are useless. They're not really policies. They're just bullet points. And there's no seriousness about that. Right? If you look at the climate policy, it's just a bunch of bullet points. They don't really want to do anything. Only if somebody's financial interests get involved, they will come and get a policy done the next day and get it implemented. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to happen. So maybe that is also something that we need to think about, and think about ways in which we can bypass this. So that is a challenge, right? If this is the way people make policy, then we as thinkers need to come up and say, how do we get around? Question number 3 is that on the issue of financing and subsidies, I think आपने बड़ा अच्छा कहा कि भाई subsidies के पैसे नहीं है, financing है नहीं. Now the thing is that we do need to bring some of the other dimensions together, which basically means how to make these industries profitable. And yes, they can become profitable. We do need to think in broader terms and perhaps bring the trade dimension into it, that an industry becomes profitable only when it becomes competitive internationally. And how do we make our businesses, the cleaning industry, competitive? I'll share some papers with you on that too. The last point, just a side point, on the nationally determined contributions. It's basically a superficial document. It's really not a serious document, right? So, since I'm not with the government, I can say these things, right? You'll understand it. Because, there are lots of caveats and so forth. Now, the main thing is that you have to distinguish between climate policy, in which the government has no interest other than getting international climate financing. They have no interest in it. But actual climate action for entirely different reasons, in which we have made a lot of progress. Right? We've set up, solar energy plants. We've set up wind energy plants. We've set up nuclear plants. We've set up hydro plants. We've done this afforestation program. We have adopted Euro 5 standards. We've done this BRT. All of these things are climate actions, but we don't call them climate actions. And if you add them up, we have actually contributed a lot to mitigation, but we don't even know it. And I think that understanding that, government, why it is not doing what it is supposed to be doing, but it is doing it on another head, but it doesn't even seem to know it. I think that's also a very important thing for you to know. Okay, green industry, maybe how to bypass policy is to make sure that the government wants to do it for some other reason and get it done thereby. Right? So these are some of the things. There is a history, and I'll share some documents with you which would be helpful. But perhaps we need to have a longer conversation. Thank you.
That's excellent. Though it's a bit saddening that in 1992, Dr. established the Sustainable Development Policy Institute, and after 31 years, governance and but still
we worked on national environmental quality standards. That's where we worked with the paper industry and the textile industry. They let us in. We did detailed audits of those industries to collect the data that people are talking about. We came up with technological solutions. We brought in technical experts to provide those solutions. We came up with economic solutions which were acceptable to the industry in order to move forward. Of course, the government was not really interested because there was no money in it. But you understand that the technical work, some of it has been done, and that can help you move forward.
Yeah, we were really very happy and thankful to benefit from that. And that's the challenge, that how to make policies today with all this baggage, which is rather mixed. Ji, there are a lot of hands right from the behind. Ji, up, yeah. Mic पीछे दे दीजिए. बिल्कुल पीछे ले जाइए.
Thank you. My name is Khan. I am an MPhil student from the Center of Public Policy and Governance, Lahore. It would have been better if we had representations from some secretaries or political representatives from Balochistan or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, because we are living in a post-18 amendment era and environment is a provisional subject. I was going through the list of for the panelists, all were from Lahore or Karachi. Still, I would ask my question from Dr. Safdar. There is a kind of political disparity and economic disparity in Pakistan. I will quote the example of Ziyarat Balochistan. It has the Pakistan's largest juniper forest, which has an area of 431 square kilometer, and it is one of its kind in the whole Pakistan, and especially in Balochistan, which lacks most of the agrarian economy. So the problem is that in Ziyarat, the landscape is that in winter the temperature goes down to -4 and 5, but there is no any connections of gas from government. As we see that we have gas connections from Sui to Lahore and Islamabad, but there is no in Ziyarat, which is near to Dera Bukti. My question is that I want to know how this very project will address these issues of political disparity, economic disparity, because Balochistan or Ziyarat does not incentivize the government of Pakistan. That's why they are not investing. Is how will this project address these issues where important ecological areas are neglected on state level? As I quoted the example of Ziyarat and many other places in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing out these points. We have talked about the structural inequities which play an important role. That we have already covered in our papers and in our project. The very fact that majority of the participants sitting in this hall are from the provinces, from other places. We had to cancel only yesterday Dr. Akbar Harifal, who is the Secretary Industries, Government of Balochistan. In our program also, he is still reflected because He couldn't travel at the very last minute due to a cabinet meeting going for a long time. So we are fully aware of the importance of provinces, importance of climate action and environmental protection action at the that is a very important part of our project. Should be happy to know that we are aware. And rules of business also say that environment is a provincial subject, so provinces have to be there and resources have to be there, and these inequities have to be addressed. Ji, next question. Ji, please. Ji, mic यहाँ दे दीजिए.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Mukeet and I'm from Institute of Polymer and Textile Engineering, University of the Punjab. I just want to draw your attention to another binding constraint. Actually, this binding constraint, is haunting or is becoming a challenge for even developed countries. And that is when they're going down the road of this path of sustainable production, they are facing the challenge of skills shortage. So I believe there are some universities in Pakistan that are offering courses in environmental sciences, but they may not serve the purpose, as we go down the road of this sustainable production and green industrialization. So I would like Dr. Safdar to please comment on this, that how can we, a course that is specific towards, sustainability should have should cover other aspects, like for example, regulatory aspects, financial aspects, and infrastructural aspects of sustainability. And even they should focus like the technological and skill aspects of sustainability. So how can we, incorporate such a course, or how can we start such a course in different universities of Pakistan? And how important is that?
It is extremely important. You see, unfortunately, most of the departments of environmental, some were sciences, some were department. If you look at their courses, they are cut and paste courses, very theoretical and high sounding, and talking about the global issues of climate change, and more or less completely disconnected from the ground realities. In my personal observation, our engineering universities are still better in the sense of designing their syllabi and their programs which address, and they are closer to the industry in that sense. Our environmental departments are basically situated more in the policy sciences, you can say, and they're making policy. But as it's now becoming very clear that policy is perhaps not even an issue, we all know that what needs to be done. Now, how to rejig these departments, which are very large in number, and they're producing huge amount of MPhils and masters with degree in environmental sciences, but of a very general nature and not in a position really to contribute much. Maybe some of them can go and set up their startups. I mean, we need innovative solution startups which can answer the question that our informal economy and sectors are seeing. That is precisely the reason that we've established this Green Industrialization Development Collective, and we are calling it a collective because we want people to be there and then review their own situation. We are at a critical stage. We must look at these things which we did in the form of a fashion, a fad or fashion. So our academia needs to focus on the real requirements, and we have many strong representation from the academia. I'll request the heads of the departments to take it as a priority to first look at the syllabi. We are producing the knowledge on the sectors on ground, identifying the needs of intervention. And Moghal sir, would you like to add?
Let's understand. I totally agree with you. That's an issue. For instance, when I was working on a plastic circularity, there was hardly 5 people I could find in the entire Pakistan who can really guide us on that. So let's understand another strength that the Pakistan has and uniquely positioned. What is the source of technology and skills in Pakistan, in industrial sector? Suppliers, vendors. Especially wherever the raw materials are imported, it also comes with technology, the process, and the skill. So being a part of the industry, this is where the most of the transfer of technology, skill, and the processes has happened. So what universities needs to do, work with us. We'll give you the skill set, which can be immediately transferred into a 1 semester course or a 2 semester course as a part of a larger curriculum, be it engineering or environmental sciences, and that can immediately go back to the industries, workable, to the point, immediately translated into the business proposition as well, because it has to make a business sense too. And this is what we are doing as a part of the industries, by the way. So that's a great source. Where the import has become a kind of a menace that we are trying to arrest, it is also a source of most of the technology transfers and also the raw materials and the processes.
Thank you.
Have time in the other session because today we started a bit late and we have to recover some time, and we would have a shorter break of 15 minutes so that we can have adequate time for our next session where we are presenting 3 major studies. Ji, please go ahead.
My name is Shahid Ali and I am PhD student from Sakhar IB University. I have a question from industry guy, Moghal Saab. Basically, sir, I'm 100% agree with you that climate issues, to tackle climate issue is a shared responsibility. It's everyone involved in this. And again, awareness is also important, because without proper awareness, implementation is, when we are talking about rules and regulations, they are less effective or not effective. But industry is one of the major contributor to the environmental issues, footprints. So what industry play its role, it's on voluntary basis without regulatory interventions. Because if we talk about the Paris Agreement, it's a voluntary agreement between world corporations. So what at a local level, for example, even we are talking about SMEs, yes, I agree that there's a lack of awareness, but what role industry play in to tackle with environmental issues?
We have 2 or 3 different platforms where we are trying to address that issue. I'm a part of a Pakistan Coding Association, which is a larger congregate, a group of the manufacturers who are working together. So being a former policy guy and also has seen it, like just Dr. mentioned, this is a challenge. So what we have done is we have started focusing on top, in terms of number of industries, top 5 percentile, upper percentile. And you will be amazed to know that these top 5% manufacturers in fact contribute 40% to the manufacturing. So what we have tried to present a business case to them, make them understand that it is not a choice anymore that you can, the environmentally compliant and the more compliant manufacturing, there is no choice. Environmentally compliant production is the way of life. So it's not a matter. So it took us a little while. Then what was the business case? I said that add up to your branding. You have seen the ads, for instance. I'm not promoting any brand, but look at the ad of Diamond Paints. It starts with the aerial view of the plant, and you will be amazed to see the entire rooftop is solar panel. The entire plant in the daytime is running on solar energy. Remember that 25% footprint comes from industries only from what type of energy you are using. They have voluntarily, they are located in the Sundar Industrial Estate, which I was telling in. they have voluntarily installed a complete effluent plant where the drinkable water comes out of it. So industry at only where the affordable financing and the capital investment makes viable, we are approaching them. We're pouching them, we are convincing them and telling them that have a premium added to your brand, have a premium added to your name, and use it and produce it. So that's the one way of doing it, but we are also, and then because they are working with the last winder industry. Somebody is supplying them packaging, somebody is supplying them the basic raw materials. So we are asking them to gradually ask them to do it. So if you are familiar with the compliance regime, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, so you would know that we are actively working on 1 and 3 especially.
Can I? Thank you very much.
Can I just quickly, just two points.
Okay, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Habib. I'm Deputy Director at Environmental Protection Agency, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So just coming back to the remark given by my colleague about the KP and Balochistan. So just, speaking for the KP province, I would say, and I would respectfully disagree with his comments that we are living in 18th century. We Environmental Protection Act, which was, passed in 2014, and we are working under that act. Recently, we have formulated our provincial climate change policy, and perhaps our province was the first one to formulate that. Not only climate change policy, but we had formulated the action plan, which actually suggests roles for different departments. And recently we have made an implementation committee to oversee the actions taken by that. So that was that. In addition to that, we have already formulated the environmental multilateral agency rules action plan, actually, for that as well. So in the last 1 year, we have been working hard to make guidelines for different industrial units from different categories of the industries. Recently, actually a week before, we have made hospital waste management rules. I mean, there were rules, but that was from the federal government, and we were implementing that. But now we have our own very comprehensive hospital waste management rules, which includes not only human health, but veterinary research centers and everything. These are very comprehensive. So yes, so that was that. The second point was about the, obviously we talk about implementation and enforcing, and we blame implementing agencies, but of course we have loopholes and we have problems. But what about compliance? If it comes to the industry, how many industries comply to the rules? How many industries have R&D sections? I don't think there are that many R&D sections in Pakistan. So let's come out of this who will build a cat? We should take ownership. We, as a country, as a nation, we have our own. We have to own this country, and we have to play our role. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Actually, coming from an enforcement agency, this is extremely important. There's a lot of action happening in the provinces, a lot of good actions, as Banori Sabha said, that we perhaps put it in some other box, but climate actions are taking place, and I think in all the provinces, as in Punjab also, Dr. Aman told us that now they are taking care of their environmental protection agencies and empowering them and expanding them. So thank you very much for sharing with us the insights from KP. I again apologize for not giving an opportunity for more questions, but we would have more time, and it's my pleasure now to request Richard for his concluding remarks as the chair of the session.
Yeah, thank you. I won't take long. A lot has been said, and there's a very rich discussion, I think, that has already started. I have to say, the constraints on moving ahead on this agenda are familiar. They're the same everywhere, whether that's data, whether that's skill problems, whether that's finance, the particular problems of small and medium-sized enterprises and the challenges that they face, all these are the problems everywhere. They're not unique, of course, to Pakistan. And I mean, in this sense, I think I agree with Tariq. I don't know, obviously, what you were doing in the 90s, but there clearly is a governance. If in fact this is a recurring problem, then we have a problem of governance, or of government. The governance language I'm not overly comfortable with. I think ultimately it's a problem of government, and that, when it comes to industrial policy, which is key to solving this problem, I think, there are a number of factors that we, I think, need to take very, very seriously. There needs to be trust. Clearly, there needs to be a sense of trust between the designers and implementers of policy and the people who have to deal with that. Trust is a very important element in that story. And in many developing countries, the lack of trust is a real barrier to actually making advance. That said, I'm not convinced personally that the voluntary solution is a solution. I think there is a tendency for industry to free ride. I'm sorry, that's industry free rides if it adds to their bottom line. That's how much business works. And therefore, there has to be a disciplinary component. And in many developing countries, unfortunately, states are very bad at disciplining their business class. And I think the absence of a disciplining mechanism is often a very important element in seeing the failures of something like industrial policy. So these elements of trust and discipline, reciprocity, complicated institutional questions that have become more complicated as a consequence of the climate constraint and challenge. But I think you need an honest and frank discussion about these kinds of institutional weaknesses if we're going to really make progress in designing the kinds of policies that can advance industrial interests, but also do that in a way that is consistent with our climate challenges. So those, I think, those difficult questions, they're not easy questions to talk about. I know that they're not easy questions, and they go back a long way. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the famous Nobel Prize economist Gunnar Myrdal, in the Asian drama, talked about Pakistan in similar terms back in the 1960s and 70s. So this goes back before your time, Tariq, probably, I assume. But these are the important questions that I think need to be honestly and frankly discussed if we're going to make progress.
Well, that is the message, I think, which would resonate again and again throughout the conference, that we must make the move, as we don't have the choice, as Moghal Sahib has said. But we have heard a lot of positives also, and the presence of all these people, and if they synergize and if they develop trust with each other and attend to the issue of sound policy making and enforcement, we would surely make a progress. And this project would contribute to that process of creating trust, better policy making, better enforcement, filling the gaps. So with this, we come to the end of this session for presenting the project, the launch part. And I must thank all the panelists and Richard for their contributions. And we have the tea laid out outside, and kindly come back in 15 minutes because we would start next session in 15 minutes. And thank you all for your patient listening. Thank you.